let's imagine this, like nothing changes. No one loses their jobs,
Yeah.
but just output is insanely fast now.
Yeah.
And the amount of content and the amount of creation that we make is just
Yeah.
exploded. And I like to think that's a better way to look
Yeah.
at it.
Welcome to another episode of Sell Me This Podcast. Today, I am honored and privileged to have with me Dan Belkie. I got the pronunciation correct.
You got it right.
And Dan, you probably introduced yourself way better than I will. So quickly putting you on in the hot seat. Who are you? How do people know you? What do people know you for?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Let's go with the professional side of it. My name's Dan Belkie. I am the founder and owner of Everything Cloud Technologies. I've been in technology since 1994, so you do the math on that one. That makes me an old guy. I got a little bit of the gray. And based in Calgary for a majority of my career, except for a small stint out in Toronto.
I like it. And so, did you start in Toronto, or did you come out here? You did something right in the middle, or kind of how did you find your way kind of to and from Calgary?
Yeah, born and raised in Calgary. And then in my early 20s, I mean, how much detail we go into, I was part of the team that launched sportscheck.ca.
Oh.
And the company that did majority of the development of it was based out of Vancouver and Toronto, a company called Blast Radius. And just became friends with them. And next thing you know, I'm living in Toronto as a young 20-year-old and did 2 or 3 years out there, and then decided I came home for Christmas and I met my wife. and I never went back.
There you go. And so differences between Calgary and Toronto. I know everyone kind of talks about a little bit of apples and oranges, but still in the Canadian ecosystem. From your perspective, the climate, and like obviously not the physical climate, but big differences between the cities.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, once again, dating myself here, this is 20 something years ago. What was so cool is that Toronto had a tech scene, and Calgary was very much just a full energy company back then. So, I remember even small things about landing in the airport and seeing advertisements for Adobe or Barracuda, on a billboard. Why are you guys advertising that out here? So, it really had a cool tech scene in that .com feel. And then, but I think Calgary's definitely got up to that and probably even surpassing it.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the progress and kind of what Calgary's tech scene is becoming. Did you always know that you were going to end up in tech? Were you the kid building computers in your spare time, or how did you find yourself in this world?
So close, man. So when I was right up into high school, I had no intention of being in technology. I actually hated it. All I did is skateboard and snowboard. That was my jam. And but my parents owned a shop that built computers. And so even go back into the 80s, they had a shop that they built Apple clones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, who even knew Apple made clones, right? And so that was in the 80s. And then I got out of high school and I was delivery guy for my dad's company. And then, it didn't interest me at all. But what did interest me was the internet. So around 95, 96, the internet was coming along. If you're from Calgary, the main guys were CADvision. And so I was just helping them set up modems, just, connecting their customers to the internet. And then I called CADvision and I said, hey, we're giving you all our customers for internet access. Can we just work a deal? And then you got to remember, I'm like a child, right? So I probably, I'm on the phone, and then
you're wearing the baggy suits and the
not even, right?
Yeah.
And so so they basically said, oh no, we don't really do that. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't get the right person on the phone. I was calling help desk or something. And I think in me, I was like, oh, that's not cool. So I'm like, Dad, we should be an MSP. Or not an MSP, sorry, an ISP. And so he's like, I don't know what's involved in that. And so we started doing the research, and totally out of my league. And we built an internet service provider.
That's amazing. So, and there's so many stories that you hear sometimes where there's this, I'll call blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
Where you if you talk to a lot of different founders, people that have grown companies, if you ask them, knowing what they know now, would they have even taken the leaps that they did? A lot of them say no. because like I don't think people understand how hard things would be, the roadblocks they would have. Like, when you're talking about launching, probably one of the early stage ISPs, did you even have a sense of what that would look like?
Not at all. I mean, I didn't even know how to use email. Like it wasn't even a thing. And I love that you say that, because I think back to that, and what I tell younger people is that, like, just do it. Just do it, and it will, like, you'll find a path through that maze. Because like if I look back and would I do it again? Oh my gosh, I would say yes. But man, the learning experiences, I had nights when the place that we were run out of was like, I don't know if you know where the back alley is.
everyone in Calgary. Yeah.
So we were just down the street from the back alley, this old house that was built in like early 1900s, tiny thing. And I'd be down there till like 2-3 in the morning trying to figure stuff out. And we had a guy at a Lethbridge help us set up a couple servers to get the thing working and authenticating. And it worked. We're happy it launched us. But then that thought goes in your head, like, what if this thing breaks? Like, who's going to fix it? And so literally, because my parents built computers, I literally had built a clone, and I'm just looking at configurations here, looking here, looking here, looking here. And, one space in the wrong spot and stuff didn't work. So long story short, just do it. But
well, and I think that idea of execution as well. I talk to a lot of different folks that are in various stages in their journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's so many people that have these big, bold ideas.
Yeah.
And then they talk about them.
Yeah.
And they talk about them and they talk about them. And then they look back 5-10 years in the future and say, like, holy shit, like I wish I would have done that.
Yep.
Have you always been a person that just is the gonna run headfirst into the fire and figure it out?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, if you talk to my wife, my execution is not always.
It depends on the project,
and the follow through is definitely not always there. But like I'm definitely a learner of like going in and failing fast, and then fixing and reiterating. I mean, agile before it was agile.
Yeah, I love it. You coined it. So you start this ISP, and so what happens next?
Yeah, so doing the ISP. Everything's good, and then Shaw comes out with cable, right? And now this is a game we can't even play in, right? Because it's all dial-up back where we were. So the market starts to erode, but where I had is we had a company called Hosting House as well, and we did website hosting. So ISP hosting, it kind of all works, and then but that industry, once it went to cable, it really started to go down, and I thought, what's next? And it's funny enough that my sister, she was an SAP consultant, and she went and did an interview with the Port Sandy Group. And so she interviews there, and they say, oh, we're launching sportcheck.ca. And she says, oh, I know a guy. And so gets me an interview there. And then I join the team that's going to launch this thing. And it's kind of funny because we both worked there for a small period of time. And she was married, so she had a different last name. Yeah. And people are like, you guys are way too friendly. Like, is something going on with you guys? Because I'd bring cookies from my mom to her, and but
I'm sure there's some awkward stories that came from that one.
For sure, for sure.
And so you go through and what was it like launching this website? Because at the time, like sportscheck.ca, like that would have been fairly progressive.
For sure, it was Canada's first like sporting e-commerce site. And we used a product called ATG Dynamo, and it was just like, it was big, and TELUS did the hosting for it. And where my role was, I came from like being kind of more of an infrastructure type person. My role was to kind of talk to the developers and talk to the data centers, and then put that all together. So
I love it. And so what happened with that experience then? So you kind of parlayed that into what?
Yeah. So basically, I was working with, the developers a lot, the company called Blast Radius, working with TELUS, made a lot of good friendships, a lot of connections. And then once that site was launched, a couple years go by, we're doing maintenance. Forzani decides to take the e-commerce department and roll it right into IT, which is like, makes sense. It should have been probably like that from the get-go. And then Blast Radius reaches out to me and they say, hey, we're going to start building a managed services division so people can host the stuff that we build. Would you be interested in coming out and helping us with that? And I thought, geez, that's cool. So literally hopped on a plane, went out there, and I mean, like that was the greatest experience, and like that was probably like the most learning I've ever done in that short period of time. Like we did Nintendo of Europe, we did BMW, we did KitchenAid, Jenny Craig. It was crazy.
That's amazing. And so like I feel like that would have been also a little bit of trial by fire.
Oh yeah.
But some really interesting exposure to how the world works. And so especially with some of those big global brands, you know, and I have these conversations a lot with people that have built their whole careers within Canada, is the world's a really big place.
Big.
And I think that, you know, even the nuance of how we do business in Calgary or even Toronto is very different than, you know, the brand headquarters that's in the UK or the brand headquarters that's in Paris. How did that kind of shape your perspective in terms of how the world actually works?
Well, I think it actually opened it up, being like there's business everywhere, right? You know, it's funny you mentioned the UK. We had a Dymo. I don't know if you know who they are, but they make the label makers.
Yeah.
We went out and we were doing work with them, and I remember, you know, we're going to their data center and they're like, guys, be careful. This is not North America. Like that power will kill you. Right. But yeah, it totally shaped that, you know, I would say it's, you know, short-sighted to think that, you know, business doesn't happen all over the world, but when you're young and you grow up in one spot, it's hard to know that there's anything outside of those walls.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're going with it. But, yeah. And the difference is that I find that Canada is more reserved, right? The US is very like, okay, let's go, just do it. Yeah. And to find that Europe is also very much like, let's just go, just go.
So do you think, and this is maybe a little bit of cause and causation, but do you think that comes from, you know, maybe different density, different competition? Like what do you think drives some of those different DNAs? Because you're not the first person to say that, you know, decisions get made way quicker in the States. That we're very conservative in terms of how the speed we move at and the pace we move at in the Canadian markets.
Yeah.
Can you kind of hazard a guess as to what maybe some of those causations are?
I mean, I think that the easiest is just, I think it's just cultural. It's just the way it is. Like even like economy, if you look at like, you know, when the recessions and, you know, depressions hit, you know, Canada was a little protected because our banking system even is just like a little more reserved, right? We're just a little more risk adverse. And we deal with a lot of American companies now. And, you know, one guy said to me, and it's kind of true. He said, you know, Canadians, it's like, you guys think that bad news gets better with time, right? And because, you know, we're very cautious, I think.
I'm going to steal that line from you because I think it's true, right? And you know, even in terms, I was on a call, you know, a couple of days ago with someone from the UAE. Yeah. And I think even the communication differences, you know, and from a self-awareness standpoint, I know that I'll usually talk in a little more flowery language. I'll talk in a big picture. Yeah. And, you know, specifics matter. Directness really matters. And, you know, that's something that even myself, I'm like, oh shit, like I need to probably hone in here for some of these different cultural nuances. Yeah,
100%. You talk about cultural nuances. I was on a call with someone from like UAE, and we're talking about like optimization and cost savings. And they're talking about people in like Saudi Arabia. And we're going to pitch this to this company, whatever. And he's like, but first of all, don't say that you're just going to save money because it doesn't matter. Yeah. We have enough money. It's not that. We want optimization of stuff. Saving money is not big on our list. And you're like, wow. Yeah. Like, because in the US and Canada, that's like number one.
Well, and I think that, you know, it becomes really eye-opening. And, you know, the cost of velocity and the cost of being there first and the cost of not being the person that innovates in some of those really competitive markets.
Yep.
Is, you know, if I want to save $500,000, I can, you know, do something very short term over here. Like cash is not the issue.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
And so then how does that start to shape kind of your worldview as you're going through some of these different experiences? You know, you're working with some of the biggest global brands in the world.
Yeah.
How does that set you up for what's next?
Yeah. And I think what it taught me scale. Yeah. Everything works really good when it's just like low scale. Yeah. And then you're like, you know, prime example is, you know, Nintendo would release a new video game, and they had this thing where, you know, you buy this game and then you could come home and once a day you go on and play this little game to get stars. Yeah. But we saw that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Europe, like the servers just got hammered, right? And I think that helped me because that translated into the world that we live in Canada. We were working with iHeartRadio,
Yeah.
and the same thing would happen to them, but in a totally different way. Is that 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning in Newfoundland, the server started getting busy on that side of the globe because people were signing in. They get to work, turn on the radio through the internet, but then it would just kind of go right across Canada, and then you kind of get halfway across Canada, and then the load was too much, and it would fall over. So everything's translatable, and I think just it taught me to push the scale, know where things break before you launch things.
And so how do you go about doing that?
Oh, wow. It really depends. I mean, I think like it's just adding load. It depends on what you're doing, but right now I'd say our world is a bit different from that, because now we're maybe purposely stepped away from like being responsible for uptime, because that's a young man's game. I mean, being tied to the pager, it was never a fun thing. So today obviously there's way more tools, and AI can just hammer the websites, and we got all these models that can do it for us.
There was a really interesting paper I read the other day that talked about even some of and this is going to be, I'll put on my nerd hat for 10 seconds here, but in terms of just the actual infrastructure load and networking load that's starting to happen with AI, a lot of those legacy patterns are actually going out the window, because it's just a constant kind of 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, because of the way that people are interacting with AI, and just even kind of upload versus download. All of those patterns in the last 3 years have completely gone out the window.
I know, and it's such a cool world that we live in. Like even after the .com, it's like it's great because you can jump in the industry at any time. If I said, I do, but you say, I got 20 years experience. Does that help me in AI? Because it sure doesn't, right? I mean, like literally, if someone's telling you, I got like 20 years of AI experience, you're probably a professor or something like that. But like, if you really want rubber to hit the road, you probably want someone that's been really keen on it for like 12 months,
right? And what I found even in the AI space, the superpower isn't necessarily the technical skill anymore. It's the domain expertise. And so I think that the trick isn't, I really understand the inner workings of how this code is developed and, how it all fits together, but rather I understand the role that AI and technology can play in terms of the information output. But I really need to be able to validate, is it true or is it BS? I really need to be able to wrap context around it from a very business specific lens. And I need to be able to translate in a way that it actually makes sense and moves the needle forward, and isn't like a make work project where you just have 400 agents that just are pushing the same paperclip back and forth.
And I mean, you talk about creative, right? I think there's two ways to look at that. You can say, well, you can be more creative because you don't need to be technical. You can actually just use it to shape what you want in natural language and say, do this. But then the other argument is like AI is using data sets, so it's kind of backwards looking. So is it really being creative, or are you just kind of rehashing the same thing over and over?
And so I'm going to be really far outside of my depth when I make some of these statements, but there's also some really interesting research on the AI side of things that talks about learning, and it's essentially learning in the same way that a toddler learns. And at what point is our creativity just the exact same thing? And we're just finding patterns from things in the past and creating and kind of forcing new connections together. And how far away is AI from actually doing that? Like I'm one of the people that advocate as well that AI is not creative. AI is a synthesizer of past information. But from a really theoretical level, it is a fascinating debate around what actually is creativity.
100%. And I'm just happy that we're here and we get to have this opportunity just to sit down together. Right?
I bet you didn't have that on the bingo card for this chat. Is the what is creativity?
Exactly.
And so you work with, you have this really interesting global exposure, and then so do you jump right into everything cloud at this point, or kind of are there a couple of more steps in the journey?
There's a couple more steps, and I'll rip through them pretty quick for you. So I worked remotely for Blast Radius and in Calgary, and spent a couple of years doing that, and then I was young, right? You're buying a house, you're doing things. So money was a big thing, and I was paid well, but my fear is that if there's ever downsizing on the team, who's the first person to go? It's not the guy. It's the guy who's not in the office. And remember, this is before working from home was even a thing, right? So I thought, I should probably go get a job locally in Calgary. So I got a job at a company called Centra, which was a VAR, like a value-added reseller. We sold a whole lot of storage. Obviously, Vosberg.
Yeah.
So like that's.
Did you guys work together there?
Oh yeah, when he.
Okay.
Well, no, not at Centra. Well, yes, because he was at NetApp.
Yeah.
And so we, I did that for a long time. It was VP of services, so all the technical implementations of NetApp was my team. And then that company was sold to the Herjavec Group. So if you know Robert Herjavec, so we did that for a couple of years, was director of data center there, and then decided to leave and start my own company called Shelter 6. And Shelter 6 was doing cloud migrations. And this was about 15 to 17 years ago. 15 years
So
ago.
you were before the big like cloud migration boom.
Yeah, it was totally premature.
Yeah.
It hurt. So, and especially in Calgary, how we're talking about, Toronto was a little more progressive. So that's where, I talk about iHeartRadio and things like that. So that's where we were able to kind of stay afloat doing that. Then we were acquired. And we were acquired by a company that liked to sell NetApp. And because they knew who we were, me and the VP from Herjavec actually also left. And they knew we had the ability to sell NetApp. And so we did that for a little while. Yeah. And then when we were done there, that got shut down, or the office in Calgary got shut down. And then I started Everything Cloud. And the reason I called it Everything Cloud was because I didn't want to go back to selling hardware. So that was
You're
my
like,
way.
I'm going to draw the line in the sand right now.
Yeah, I'm on the island. I'm burning the boats. We're never going back to selling hardware. So that was when that started.
It sounds like we have a little bit of a similar story. Like obviously you have different paths to get there, but we had a little bit of an inflection point where we're both in kind of that VAR MSP space.
Yeah.
And I had that, after I left where I was previously. I had that same realization, which is like, I'm going to draw the line in the sand, and here's some of the things that I don't want to get back into.
Totally.
And it really formed, I'd say, the initial narrative of what we were building with Deliver Digital.
Yep.
And so, obviously you've matured in the same way, the narrative of Everything Cloud.
I haven't matured.
You haven't, maybe the narrative is matured.
The narrative's matured for sure.
So if you were to so what does Everything Cloud do today?
Yeah. So Everything Cloud does cloud cost optimization, and I like to maybe sometimes drop the cost. We do cloud optimization, and why that's so important is because I go back, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, doing cloud migrations, and cost wasn't a KPI. The KPI that we had was this better be as good or better than it was on-prem, because I'm putting my job on the line. So we would move people there, and people would move from a capital expense to an operational expense, and they thought, oh, this is great. And I'll be quite honest, I've been in the cloud like a long time. Yeah. I still don't understand that. Right? Is that like, I get it, money's money, but I think at larger scale, operational expenses or expenditures are just easier. Yeah. But regardless, not my concern. And then what happened is, part of our engineering is that 3 years later, people are like, whoa, this is expensive. And then cost quickly became a KPI for us. Yeah. So what we did is we started building our own internal tools to help our team manage our customers and reduce their costs and do things more efficiently. And then so we ran that for probably a good 7 years. And then about 3 years ago, we decided, hey, let's shine this thing up, make it into a SaaS offering. And so we did. And so then we compete with the likes of, the Aptios and those guys of the world. And Canada-based companies, there's not a whole lot of FinOps SaaS platforms in Canada. So
incredible. So I have infinity questions about that in general, but I think that I don't want to say the rush for everyone to move to the cloud, right? And was a really interesting one. So I was on the service provider side during, we'll call it that boom.
Yep. Cool.
And you saw so many people that just essentially tried to replicate what they'd built in the past.
Yeah.
And essentially treat it as a different server.
Yep, exactly.
And so, I know that the listeners of the show aren't overly technical, so I'm not going to get too much into the weeds. And I feel like you and I can have a beer and share a whole bunch of war stories,
Yep.
About what that world looked like. But for the customers that are coming across your desk right now, what are the main problems that they're having?
Visibility.
Yeah.
So number one, it's visibility. There's two things. It's visibility and execution is actually the problem, because you can go out and you can get a tool to monitor your cloud. Great. So that tool is telling you that these servers are over provisioned, these servers are under provisioned. You've got disks that aren't attached to things. You have load balancers with no compute behind them. I know I'm getting super nerdy. Okay.
Well, how about thesaurus just screwed up on the bottom of the screen here?
Yeah. All these things are wasting money.
Yeah.
It's basically the number one thing. But the problem is we've taken the responsibility of that cost and we've moved it down to like the developers.
Yeah.
Because they're like, hold on, my job is to make these things fast and up all the time. Now I have to worry about fast up, but balanced with cost. Not really my job. So what we find is a lot of these tools came out and the visibility is great, but it's like having a fitness watch to say, hey, you haven't got enough steps today. Okay. So am I going to do something about it, or am I not? And that's what makes us a little bit different. I know that sounds a little bit salesy, but number one, we show you what's wrong, but number two, we're actually spawning like tickets to say like, here are the things that you have to execute on. And if you're not going to execute on them, we can do it for you.
So do you still have that services backend kind of built into the
100%.
business then?
Yeah.
Okay, so perfect. So just to kind of make sure I fully distill this properly, you're kind of the lighthouse within their cloud infrastructure to be able to say, here's all the things that are going on. Here's the 5 alarm fires. Here's the burning brush fire over here. Here's something not to worry about.
Yep.
And then you're kind of doing air traffic control to say, here's where the planes are going to land. And if you need someone to hop in the plane, I'm trying to carry this analogy for you.
No, I love it. I love it.
If you need someone to hop in the plane and land it like the Sully guy that landed in the Hudson River, that's where you step in as well.
Absolutely. And then one step further, because we're talking about MSPs and CSPs, because I came from that VAR world, I love it. Like, I honestly, I love that. So what we did is we changed our model from an enterprise model. We're actually doing this for MSPs. So basically they use so our customers are actually MSPs and CSPs. We're like FinOps in a box for them. And when I talk about like creating those tickets, like here's what's happening in your customer's environment. Here are 15 tickets that are going to save your customer $10,000. Like go execute on those.
And so I love that. And I think that it's much needed in the space. But there is a little bit of friction there sometimes, especially if these MSPs are the ones that are billing some of those cloud things.
Yeah.
And so is there a specific type of MSP that's using your platform or product? Or kind of what's the driving force for them to want to create that change for their customers?
Well, sometimes they're pulled into it.
Yeah.
So they're pulled into it because I understand 100% what you're saying is like, as an MSP, I make, my 15 points or whatever off selling Azure to my customer. So if their bill is lower, then I'm making less money. The truth of the matter is that only works for like 12 months. And then someone else reaches into that customer and says, hey, listen, Mr. Customer, I can save you a bunch of money, blah, blah, blah. And so we're seeing that our customers are MSPs that are a little bit more progressive. They're saying, yeah, we have to get ahead of this because our customers are going to ask for it or they are asking for it. But then also we see people that are just more like, I want to add another revenue stream or another thing into the working. And I'm trying to think through this, but if you're familiar with like managed SOC, right? So there was a lot of MSPs will sell that service, right? It's a managed SOC. We're a managed financial operations center. So I got to think of a better name, but that would be a managed FOC.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I feel like we're going to have to bleep that one out. But, no, so that makes sense though, because I think that sometimes the misconception, especially with the MSPs, is that they're all things to everyone, and they just especially with some of the kind of smaller mid-market ones, you just don't have the bandwidth to be able to pull in that expertise, that knowledge. And so it sounds like you can fill a really interesting gap for them to add value to their customers.
Yeah. And, jumping ahead, what the next thing that's happening is AI spend.
Yeah.
Right. And let's be honest, like in our world, AI spend is just cloud spend.
Yeah.
We're taking payroll costs and we're moving them to tokens.
Yeah.
But That's cloud. So that's the next thing that's coming that these MSPs got to get ahead of.
Well, and that was one of the things that I was really curious about because, like, for all intents and purposes, there's some, specific stories where someone building their own kingdom
Yeah.
internally makes sense. But I would say for the most part, people want to consume the services that they purchase, and they're mostly by de facto on the cloud now.
Yeah.
You see a lot of organizations that are at varying levels of maturity starting to deploy some of these AI workloads, some of these AI platforms and tools. But even when you start to get to a scenario where you start to talk about augmenting those developers with AI development, if you start to think about some of those purchase decisions starting to go even further downstream away from a human, and I'm sure you see this as well, but that whole ecosystem really becomes in the cloud, and that whole ecosystem needs line of sight in a way that probably becomes more important, not less.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And even with our own stuff, we talk about, our engineering team that, creates these tickets and all that, very AI handled now, right? Yeah. So now we're really doing a lot of that review and fine tuning the AI agents that are actually doing all this work, so now, and, full circle is like, can it be done at scale? Heck yeah. Now scale's a lot easier.
So is this a pattern? Like, I'm always the person that likes to find patterns in things. And so if we think about the and I'm sure we can take it back a variety of different iterations where, the internet was one thing. But if we think about, the cloud boom where everyone moves their workloads to the cloud, you have a whole bunch of, CIOs, boards, CFOs saying we need to move to the cloud. There's probably some humorous stories in there in terms of, do they understand what they're getting into? But so that they move all the stuff to the cloud, they have this like, holy crap moment. We're spending a ton of money. We don't really know what's going on. You start to see a little bit of a pullback.
For sure.
And then it starts to mature kind of 5-10 years down the line.
Yeah.
Is that the stage we're at with AI right now, where we're still in the excitement, everyone kind of, run full steam into the burning building, just like, let's deploy AI everywhere and then we'll figure it out later phase?
I think so. I think there's a lot of like, let's AI everything. And I don't want to say it's a correction. Like we will see a maturing of it, right? Because it's like, okay, maybe this is not a candidate for AI. Maybe this is. So yeah, I think we'll see it fine tuned, but it's everything though. That's the thing. There's very few things in my mind. I'm trying to think of an example of something you can't leverage it for today. It'll touch every piece, I think.
It's true, but I think that the interesting part of that discussion, and I was having this with someone the other day, is the actual true cost of AI as well, because AI right now is, for lack of a better word, heavily subsidized.
Yes.
And it's for, it's subsidized by VCs right now, hoping to get more and more users.
100%. Yeah.
And so you're starting to hear a little bit, like, I don't know if you saw the Uber story where Uber, burned, I think, $500,000 in a month on AI tokens. And we're like, okay, well, let's just put pause on this for 13 seconds.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think you're starting to see some of the realities of what that cost story actually looks like for these workloads. And in some cases, you're hearing the almost humorous narrative of, we're going to bring in junior developers now to support our AI.
100%. And this is exactly, you nailed it. This is exactly where, when I mentioned, like, it's a cloud cost to us, right? So now we're actually, doing reporting on, okay, if you take, Sally, who's making $75,000 a year coding invoices, and we replace that with AI, but if it costs us $200,000 worth of tokens to do it, it doesn't make sense. So we have to be able to report on that and give the true cost analysis.
So going back to that patterns conversation, are there patterns from your experience through some of those different cloud iterations that you would kind of offer as words of wisdom, points of context? Like, what are the similarities that you can draw if you're talking to some of these executives to say, here's the framework and lens to evaluate everything through?
Oh man, I don't know if I can give points of wisdom, but I think we've seen this before. I think we've seen the internet, right? Yeah. Like the internet totally changed the way we work. And if I want to jump over the little things that happen in the middle of that, this is that again. And this feels also to me very .com boomy, right? Like, it's very funded. No one's making money. It's kind of like a snake eating its tail. They're just moving the money around. And then, are we going to see a bit of a bust? I mean, probably with some corrections, but I mean, I think we get excited about all these things is that, first it was internet changed the way we worked. Then it was like virtualization, which was like, wow, this is amazing. Then it was cloud, right? And I told myself after cloud, I'm done. And now we're in AI. So, I mean, I don't know if you can look at it through a specific lens or a framework to say, hey, this is where you should go.
No.
But I think you can just look at history and probably that's going to tell you, it'll mature and there'll be some guidelines I have to put on it. And, to stop babbling on this, let's go back to the .com. Same thing. Everything was so exciting. And then there was that bust. And then people are like, oh, okay. So the business plan has to make money. Okay, I get it. And so I think we'll probably see that more with AI is that it'll have to make sense.
Yeah. Well, what's the quote? Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And I think, AI, we'll see it get more cost effective.
Yeah.
And then that might help. That might fix everything.
Yeah, well, I think, once again, very theoretical, and I feel like we keep getting pulled into the, what is the world conversation, but, especially as AI starts to develop its own AI, like I think there was a recent, release that came out from Anthropic, and they said, most of this is now written by AI itself.
Yeah.
We're just kind of the bumpers in the bowling alley a little bit.
Yep. And I think that we're also, people are like vibe coding things. Like I'm vibe coding features and then passing them to our developers to say, hey, what do you think of something like this? Which is great because it gives me actually more of a concept, right? And so I think that we talk about putting the bumpers in place. We're seeing people vibe code things and it's acceptable. It's like before rebooting your Windows machine was acceptable.
Yeah.
Now rebooting your Windows machine is not acceptable, but now having like code with bugs in it, it's acceptable.
So does this change the role of technology teams then? Yeah. Because there used to be this, like, I don't even want to say thinly veiled, like it was almost like just a 4-inch curtain or 4-inch thick curtain that just went across, and it's like, this is IT, please don't touch it.
Totally.
We'll say yes or no, and then like you'll deal with those consequences. I love to tell the story. We have a customer, and we have done a whole bunch of different projects for them. But their biggest power user of AI in their organization right now is probably their CFO.
Yeah, totally.
And our conversations have evolved from when him and I first sat down together to, okay, well, how do we pick the right service partners? How do we align some of these fundamental pieces of the organization to, we're talking about different cloud releases, we're talking about different tools we're using, how we're integrating workflows. He's doing stuff that I would say far exceeds what I do.
Yeah.
And he's their CFO with zero technical training.
Yeah.
And I think that democratization of what is technology becomes a really interesting conversation, and especially when you think about the role of some of those traditional technology teams, traditional MSPs. Yeah. Like, do you have a perspective on kind of how that's shifting?
Well, you know what? I would say that everyone's in technology, period. Like it's like there's no more of that veil to say this is the IT department. And here's where I think in my mind where everything totally shifted is, Nest. Remember like the the thermostats? So you got like Honeywell. Built thermostats for your house for years. And then all of a sudden someone leaves Apple or Google and they make like a Wi-Fi connected thermostat. And then all of a sudden like Honeywell's like, oh man, now we have to get into technology. We have to have a team of developers. We have to build an app, right? And they got dragged into this technology world. And so I would say it's table stakes to be in technology now. Everyone's in technology.
So what does that mean for the technologists then? Like what does that role become?
Oh, wow. I would say it's emerging technologies is probably where it is. And once again, you're looking at what's happened in the past, maybe applying some of those to the future. But I also think we're going to see some like real big, bold moves to say, you can't do that. And you can. Maybe Elon, right? Yeah. Like you can't do that.
Well, even if you think about that, that idea of almost, we talked about when you started your first MSP, sometimes when you don't understand the risk of what you're doing, you can make some really incredible leaps. You can also expose a ton of risk, which I think is probably a whole other podcast episode.
For sure.
But I think what gets unlocked by not having some of these traditional mindsets and some of these traditional, if this, then that, and then this, then that constraints becomes a really interesting accelerator.
100%. And I'm going to screw this up. I love the quote. I think it was Henry Ford. It's whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, I like that, and like it definitely makes sense in this context. So I feel like we've been cruising through a whole bunch of different topics, and I do want to spend a little bit of time understanding, not necessarily the business of Everything Cloud itself,
Sure.
but your journey in terms of building it.
Yeah.
And so it's not an easy journey being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
I think for the right people, it can be the most rewarding and fun journey alive.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the story of how you've been building Everything Cloud.
How I built Everything Cloud. Well, essentially, I think, we're very fortunate to be able to work with a lot of those brands, build my network, and, be, I think, responsible with the finances is probably the number one thing, because I never wanted to go out and borrow any money. I wanted to bootstrap it. And because I had some, maybe we'll call them seed customers, that really helped. But, Everything Cloud is one of the times that the first time I didn't just get my hands dirty. I decided I'm getting older. I got to make sure that like the real people, the smart people are doing this. So, what we did is we've been through, a couple iterations of development cycles. And we met, an organization out of the Ukraine. This is pre-war, that helped us get this off the ground. And what's crazy is the sales guy that started that. I met him like online in the Ukraine, and now he lives in Toronto, and he's our operations manager.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, a lot of offshore at first, kind of get the proof of concept, that MVP off the ground, and then, bringing it, internal.
Yeah.
But we still have a mix of internal now and external.
What are some of the biggest things that, as you were building the company, that you didn't, that came true, but you didn't quite realize they'd be the mountains you had to climb?
I think just like anything, you think everyone's just going to love this, right? Like, everyone's just going to eat this up. And I think that would be the number one thing that I would tell people is that, technology aside, any businesses, I believe, all about sales. You need a sales channel, because without sales, there's no company, right? And I think Cuban said that one. So I like to quote it, I guess. But the hurdles for us, they're not huge, because it's moving so fast that even if you miss a hurdle, there's always another one to fix. And I talk about AI, right? 12 months ago, we weren't thinking about optimizing AI. Now we're like, oh my gosh, we have to optimize AI.
Yeah.
But now we have to go back to our developers and say, listen, our model needs to be able to iterate fast.
Yeah.
So now we have to go back and fix all the stuff we did in the past, so that when the next cool thing comes along, we can deploy in weeks, not months.
So do you think some of that legacy, and I'll call it legacy, but some of that legacy learning. So if you think about your first stories of having to, have the standby Apple clone sitting beside the old one, and some of the, the actual physical elements of starting to pull some of these things together. Do you think that's kind of shaped your understanding of how you need to re-architect some of these things?
Yeah, I think so. Because the world's changed also. The world's changed because, before, even early in my career, when we'd have a project come down from the organization, you lived in this world too, I'm sure, is that they say, well, what do we need for servers? And you'd be like sizing them. And so you'd size it, like pick as big as we can and then double it. And then, the servers would be ordered, and then 2 months later they show up, and it'd be this huge thing. But now I can go spin up a server in, 20 minutes. And so I think that's changed the industry a lot, and it's allowing us to fail fast.
Yeah. If you were to kind of look back and maybe talk to Dan from, we'll say, the weeks and months before you launched Everything Cloud, is there any specific advice you'd give to yourself, or any words of wisdom, or a pat on the back? Like, what would you say to Dan of that time?
I'd probably say, don't worry about it. Like, it's going to be good. Like, don't fear it. And then I would have also told myself, like, you should have done this a couple of years earlier. Right. Because, I had to be responsible. I wanted to, get into that corporate world. And looking back, some of my best successes were not in the corporate world. It was when I ventured out. Yeah. So I would have told myself to quit my job earlier and go for it.
I've given myself the same kind of words of previous wisdom. I wish I'd done this sooner, but I'm also, to your point, really grateful for the experiences. Like I get asked by a lot of, 20-something-year-old people that are looking at starting their own businesses. And I think you can learn a ton from it, but it is really nice to kind of learn on someone else's dime sometimes.
Absolutely. But it makes me wonder, right? I know we keep bringing this back to AI, but I mean, when AI is doing the junior's job, what does the junior do?
Yeah.
Right. How do you get that experience?
Well, and once again, I feel like we're teetering into the theoretical, but we compete quite heavily with traditional consulting firms that are built on leverage models, no different than a accounting firm, no different than a legal firm, and their whole model is built on I hire MBA with a fancy degree. I give them a playbook.
Yeah.
And they execute on the vision from up above, and by kind of process of promotion and kind of self-selection, that 100 juniors turns into 50 seniors, which turns into 4 senior partners, which turns into 1 manager. So there's a full arithmetic. And so if you get rid of that lower layer, not only does the economic model just fall in the garbage, but also that whole, I don't want to say the whole context model, but your whole delivery model changes. And so I think that the thing that AI really democratizes is that entry-level knowledge. But to your point, what I get really concerned about is the context that you earn by having things go really well, by having things like falling on your face. And I think that you can only learn that sometimes through trial and error. And so I do get a little bit concerned around what happens to the world in 15 years when you don't have anyone that has any practical experience.
Tell me about it, man. Claude was offline this morning.
Yeah.
I was like, I almost didn't get my presentation out. Right?
My whole day was almost ruined. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I agree with you. And I think, we're kind of doing the juniors a disservice. However, I think that maybe we're also having the same conversations that our parents had and our grandparents had. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're having ATMs now.
Yeah.
All the people at the bank are going to lose their money, right? Or all the people at the bank are going to lose their jobs. Self-checkout. Oh my gosh, self-checkout. What happens to the cashiers? We're doing them in a service, but it's just a shift, right? Because now self-checkout, well, someone has to develop the software, someone has to put in the hardware, someone has to. So I think everyone's going to be okay. They'll just find it. It's going to be different than we think it'll be, though.
I think so, and I think that if you were to ask even some of the people, like and I feel like I've used ourselves maybe too many times as a reference in this episode here, but we have a couple full-time employees on our team, and they're both in their early 20s, and we use an incredible amount of AI to run our operations. But I think what that also enables is an incredible acceleration of the work that they're actually doing versus, I remember, some of my first jobs where it's like, move widget A from like A to B, over and over and over again. And you kind of get rid of some of that mundane. And so maybe there's less of those opportunities, but they're accelerated. Who knows? Like, I think there's 2 sides to every narrative.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's the truth. I think that, let's imagine this, like nothing changes. No one loses their jobs, but just output is insanely fast now. And the amount of content and the amount of creation that we make is just exploded. And I like to think that's a better way to look at it.
I'm always the eternal optimist. So I think you and I might be wired similarly on that front. Dan, I've loved this conversation. I feel like there's probably another full episode of conversations that we could have. But if you wanted to leave our listeners with any kind of last words of wisdom of things that they should think about, is there anything you wanted to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I would just say, like, if you're in Canada, and this is one of my decisions, is that when you have this fear of going out and doing your own thing and like the fear of the unknown. But you know what? You're born here. Like you've already won, right? Like your risk to actually go out and do something big is so much less than if you were born somewhere else in the world that didn't have the opportunities that you have. So number one, I would just say like go out and do what you want to do and add your mark on the world. I know that sounds so fluffy, but I think just as you get older, it's like, man, people are doing such cool stuff. So
I love it. Well, I feel like that's a phenomenal way to wrap up the episode.
man,
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend a few minutes chatting today.
anytime.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Yeah, ditto.
Awesome.
Taco Tuesday.
There you go. Perfect.
All right.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
If you've made it this far, like and subscribe on YouTube or follow and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss any future episodes.